Hello. Oh, the mic is on. Excellent. Hope you guys are doing all okay. We ready to start? Yeah, brilliant. Welcome, everybody. It's the last day of Develop. I hope you guys all recovered a little bit from yesterday. It's extremely hot out there. I really hope you guys are staying hydrated, but really, really happy you're here. So, and I've lost my voice, so please do excuse me while I struggle through this. So my talk is it frozen? Sorry. Yeah. We're testing the clicker. This one, right? All right. So my talk is called "The Realities of Starting an Indie Game Studio." So when I was putting together this talk, I was thinking about what I wish I had known when I had sort of started in just business in general. I have been starting businesses for a really long time. So basically, you have a great game idea, but does that necessarily mean that you have what it takes to actually run a successful business? I think that most game developers wanting to start their own studio haven't been to business school. I'd say that was pretty accurate. You guys have obviously done stuff that you want to do. And you don't have a perfect business plan either, but is passionate enough to get a small company off the ground. So in this talk, what I plan on exploring are topics related to startup formation, some tips and tricks, just some anecdotal information that I hope that some of you find useful, hopefully to assist any aspiring game entrepreneurs out there. So some of the takeaways for this session is that I'm just going to talk to you about my experience from starting a business in games with no money, industry connections, or AAA experience. Another thing I want to also highlight is kind of the ways in which we can mitigate risk. There's a lot of risk in starting up a business and a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears that go into that. So how can we make sure that we are at least keeping the lights on at home, right? Another thing that I find is really important is something that I didn't really approach until we started taking on staff, right? Is what is your responsibility and fiduciary duty in actually being a founder? So my name's Jay. I run an indie company called Arrogant Pixel. We've been going for about 7 years now. We have an outsourcing department that kind of props up the IP development. I'm sure many of you know that life already. But I'm also a course leader and a senior lecturer at the University of West London. I basically look after the BA Games Design and Animation degree. So aside from running my own company, I'm training the next generation of game developers coming into the industry. So as I was saying just a few minutes ago, most entrepreneurs haven't been to business school and don't have the perfect business plan. But what we do have in spades is a passion to really create something amazing, I think. I believe that the startup organization is one of the best and most efficient ways to make the world a better place. I think it's something that people should be aware about, even if that's not something that you want to do. If you take a group of people with the right equity incentives and organize them in a startup, you can unlock human potential in a way never before possible. You can get them to achieve unbelievable things. But if the startup organization is so great, why do so many fail? And that is the age-old question. So the format of the session, and you can tell I'm a lecturer, just setting you all up, I'm going to be raising a series of statements and questions that business owners need to be asking themselves all the time, ideally before you launch, but it's something that should sort of inform your everyday, right? They're rhetorical for now, but I'm totally happy to take questions at the end, and you can see me running around, I'm sure, at the end. So my hope is that you start to think seriously about the real world impact your decision to start an indie game studio may have on yourself and others around you that come into your space. And that actually helps you focus on what's important to the ultimate success of your startup. Okay, so that is the sort of the frame that we're starting with. But first of all, here's a really, really great quote. It's video game development is really hard, Okay, it's a quote from a really excellent book called, that I highly recommend you guys go and read. It's called Blood, Sweat and Pixels. If any of you guys are aspiring game entrepreneurs, it is like something that you should really look at and study. So this quote is a little bit dated. It's from 2017, but I truly believe it to be true. It's an incredibly difficult thing that we've chosen to do, and there are certainly easier ways to make money, and certainly easier business models that are out there that you can do. But we're here now, so, but to kick things off, here are the main reasons why game development is difficult. I'm sure lots of people, you'll agree with this. So they're interactive. So it's not simple, you know, when you are having users interact with software, right? But obviously, because of lack of resources, indie companies are at a distinct advantage. So first challenge is that they're interactive and you need to make it work, essentially. The second is technology is constantly changing and you guys need to be learning all the time. You can't just make a home in a certain set of tools and software and think that's it, you know? I'm sure you guys all know that like staying on top of like industry trends is like the keys to sort of getting ahead. And software development, I don't know if you've noticed, it's really, really expensive. Developers, programmers demand high salaries, maybe not in comparison to like other industries, but they are the highest paid members in a game development studio. So if you want to create software, you're gonna have to pay programmers and therefore you need to be able to support that in some way. Scheduling seems to always be a problem. That's why like even the AAA still haven't quite figured it out yet. Because it's project focused and not process based, it's really hard. Every new game that you make is a new project. It's a new budget, new constraints, new tools, new engines sometimes. And again, you don't know how fun a game actually is until you've made a prototype of it and actually tested that theory. So that is why the main reasons game dev is hard, but let's start with our first question. Well, statement rather. So there's no magical formula to company success. I'm sure that you will look around at all of the amazing companies in the expo. They're so diverse and deliver so many services and products that just, you know, come from all over the place. And founding your own small business is unlike any other job you take on. It's a lifestyle. It's so much so that you will have to ask yourself whether you're actually ready for complete commitment to the dream, you know, and complete commitment to the success of your business as well. If you're in a relationship, for example, your partner needs to be on board because it's going to affect them, right? If you've got children, it's something that you also need to consider. You'll have less time for your personal life. You may put yourself in a position of using much of what you own as collateral to raise money for the business. And it's actually a really irresponsible thing to do, to start a business without fully, you know, addressing these things and asking yourself these questions. So a few things you should know. The startup survival rate remains low. So estimates vary, but up to a third of new UK businesses are believed to fail within their first year, while more than half fail within 2. But the good news is the other half go on to become successful brands and companies, right? Many new businesses do survive. So starting a business can provide you with a more rewarding life, but again, as you say, it's a gamble. There's no guarantees. And remember that you are a human that relies on other humans to survive. We live in a social society. You'll be requiring so much support, not just from your staff and your team members, but from your support network, you know, in terms of your friends, your family. If your family and friends are against the idea of you running a business, you'll find it that much more difficult to like stay motivated to actually complete it. And yeah, those are the few things that I wanted to highlight, but like, next slide. So the core thing here is like, why do you want to start an indie games studio when there are other things that you could do? You can work in a game studio as well as an employee. Why is it that it's the business that you want to get into? Ask yourself why specifically an indie game studio. Are you ex-AAA vets looking to create your magnum opus? Or are you a graduate team looking to fill up your portfolio? Both very valid reasons to want to do that. But there are very two common scenarios and rationales that people use to start their studios. But what I can do is talk about my background and experience before I founded Arrogant Pixel with my partner and friends. Hopefully it will help you think more deeply about why this question should matter to you. So the reason behind starting any business is really crucial, because if you don't have a why down from the beginning, it's really difficult to rally people if you don't really have like a purpose. So one of the main reasons I have behind starting a studio is that I really wanted to run my own business, even more than I actually wanted to be a game developer, I think. You need to actually want to be a business person. So I was previously in the music industry. I'll talk to you about a couple of company failures that I've had and the lessons that I learned. The other thing that you need to think about is you need to make it commercially viable, right? It's like creating with the intention of making money. So you need to be thinking about your series of games rather than the one project that you're coming into it with, right? And also you need to like dealing with people and working in teams. Otherwise just be self-employed and be a freelancer. But even then you are still having to like communicate with clients and teams and stuff like that. You can't avoid it, you know, when you are going into business. So few sort of starting points if you haven't started your business already, like nail the main concept or the goal. So one thing that you could do is that you can replicate or improve someone else's idea. They've already gone and done the research and you can just improve upon it. That's a very, very effective method. And also I think that the first mover advantage is a bit of a myth as well. If you think about MySpace, Facebook, we saw that, you know, they studied what had come before and created something that was a lot more applicable and relevant to the current market. And also we really study the competition and see where there are gaps, maybe where they might be weak, and also really deeply thinking about what we are good at and almost specializing in it, you know, and becoming the go-to company for that specific thing that people want. So what is the culture that you want to create? Now, there's some companies that go, we're a family and all of this stuff, or are you more like a pro sports team, you know? You want to be able to instill that culture and identity in anybody that sort of comes within your circle, and then you can move together. And related to that is what is your brand identity? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And truly think about whether there is a gap in the market for your products. Now, this is kind of like telling you to become like fortune tellers or something like that, as we know in games, because they take so long to make, that you're almost thinking about what is going to be relevant in like 2 or 3 years' time. And that's an impossible task, but that is something that we kind of have to do. You kind of have to be okay with making decisions based on 50% of the information. Do you know what I mean? So it's really good to sort of follow your own ideology, political and social convictions, because that's where the authenticity comes from, right? So the age-old question, how are we going to pay for this thing? So there's loads of different types of income. They can be largely understood by breaking them into 2 main categories. So what is commonly known as active income versus passive income. Now, it's fairly simple. When active income is when you get paid for your time. So like getting a job, for example, you get paid for the time that you were there in the company. So it could be a job, coaching, consulting, public speaking, or a service that you might provide. Sorry, I just lost the scroll there. Let me see if I can get it back. No, this way. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's basically a service thing, so that you are exchanging money for the active time that you're putting into whatever that you're doing. And passive income, the dream, is when you're earning automated income without having to actively do anything to earn that income. So once you produce that product, it's out in the market, it's sort of turning over. Now, the benefits of it is that active income, you can get paid quicker, short term, right? So I work 5 hours on that project, I'm going to get paid within realistically about a month or something like that. Passive income is something where you have to invest a load into like whatever you're doing, release it, and that is when you start reaping rewards. And normally with passive income, it's very small amounts of money. So it's more about long-term passive income, but you're looking at very, very small amounts, you know, so it needs to get to a point where the passive income and the short-term income sort of support one another, I think. So the age-old question is, okay, I have a fantastic idea, but how am I actually going to pay for this? So the first business idea I had was all passive income based, first mistake. So I set up my first business at university, age 19 or something like that, very, very green. I was going to build the greatest website the world had ever seen, of course. So I teamed up with some of my fellow students. We got underway with the design, development, strategy, you know, and the future looked incredibly positive. In fact, we even took out like an £8,000 loan at the time between 4 directors to help us along. So it was like £2,000 each, didn't break the bank, you know, we could sort of experiment within that space. It actually turned out to be the greatest investment I ever made. Now, this kind of statement is normally followed by some flowery story about a meteoric rise to fame. I failed fast, I failed quickly when I had very little money at stake. Yeah. I made loads of mistakes, but I'm glad I made them then and not with my current studio. Now you could choose to look at that as £8,000 down the drain, but try looking at it this way. I could have spent £9,000 a year on a management degree. In fact, I was also spending £9,000 on a management degree. I'm not one of the most entrepreneurs. I did go to business school. I did have what I thought was a perfect business plan. Regardless of the student debt, I actually felt that that £2,000 personal investment in me gave me the best lessons in my education, also in my entrepreneurial experience. Then my second and third businesses were all service and active income based. So I wasn't looking at passive income at all. So I was self-employed for much of my young adult life, and I had a lot more success with it to the point where I was able to live from it. But there's a limit, right, to how many hours there are in the day, and physically, like how long you can work, you know, without, you know, collapsing. And I really felt the problem with that was, as a solo freelancer, I really felt like I was not confident or experienced enough to command a price that was fair, you know? And I was not very confident in negotiating at the time. So I was always undercutting myself and others. I thought that was the only way to compete, which means that there was not really much profit in it, and therefore made it really hard to grow, right? So I always felt like I had to undercut in order to stay competitive, but I know now that pricing is a choice that you make. I think there's a talk a little bit later about pricing indie games, so I won't go too much into that. But pricing is a choice to be made and says a message about like the kind of quality of the product or service that you're offering, and it's not a hole to fall into. It is a decision at the end of the day. So let's go about what type of business. So it's really good to be honest. Well, you have to be honest and realistic when you're trying to do this. So answering these sort of fundamental questions will help you to decide the kind of business that you want to run. So realistically, how much time can you afford to commit? Now, that is, well, evenings and weekends, like that sort of thing. How much money would you ideally like to earn? Those are key questions. A really good exercise that I found personally, and when I was starting up the freelancing business, because it was very much like that's what I wanted to do, is I put together a personal survival budget. And what that means is like I needed to know a number that I had to hit every single month. Otherwise, I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent. Do you know what I mean? Just be able to know your bottom line, and anything above that is like a bonus, and just approach it that way in the beginning, and then you kind of scale and grow from there. So is it full-time, part-time, spare time, or possibly even a seasonal business? Totally fine as well. If you're the kind of business that wants to arrange events, it could be seasonal, like, you know, tandem, all of that stuff. So, and then do you start a business online or offline? That's also, well, a lot of game development studios are remote these days, so it's obviously a little bit cheaper and a little bit better. But maybe you do want to have a premises. That is something to consider, and that is a decision, again, to be made. Now, this is something I actually really think is important. So I'd invite you all to take a moment and actually think about what is important to you. Are there certain behaviors that you want to encourage in your team? How do you want your business to be perceived by the wider industry as well? I'm sure I'm repeating some information you may have heard before. There was a panel before about indie game startups and stuff like that. But having a company mission statement and setting out your core values actually helps you to make strategic decisions. So it's actually best to be really specific about what you do. So the mission and vision statements really define where you're going, but core values are all about what you are. So when I took part in the Creative UK's Game Scale-Up program this year, shout out to Chris Bain because he's amazing, it gave me space to really think about these things, whereas always something that was just like, oh, later at some point, you know, but it was really highlighted and brought forward as something that was really important. Truly, it helped me focus down on the things that were important to me and allowed me to set some much needed boundaries. You know, it's really tempting to say yes to everything, especially when you're desperate, right? For example, I'll just tell you what the work that we did in terms of like putting up, creating Arrogant Pixels mission statement. So our mission is to deliver unexpected and genre-subverting gaming experiences with a lot of heart. Simple sentence right there. But it means that if we're working on our own IP and not for outsourcing clients, it must have an element that is subversive in some way, and it must be commercially viable so that it has the potential to be chart-topping. Those are two criteria. If the idea does not meet those two criteria, it can't be an Arrogant Pixel game. I hope that makes sense in some way. So whether that's exploring different ways in which to design the user experience or breathing new life into unfashionable genres, it basically means that if it doesn't meet those core principles, it's not getting made, pretty much. So it allows us to forge an identity through the games that we make by sticking to those core values, right? So our vision and ultimate goal, which is slightly different from the mission statement, are to create award-winning, chart-topping games that stand out from the crowd. That is our goal, right? And when thinking about our core values, we thought the following were important to us. So I sat down for drinks with the directors and we were thinking like, okay, what is it? So the bullet points that we had were, we are pioneers and explorers, you know, improvers, not first movers, equality, collaboration, and inclusion. Good ideas don't adhere to a hierarchy. They come from everyone in the company. Quality craftsmanship. We really take pride in our skills and our tradesmanship in developing software, and that everyone is responsible for the success of the project, right? So those are what are important to me as a company owner, and it helps to recruit, it helps to attract talent, and it also helps you to keep you really, really focused on what it is that it is important. And then if we're talking about responsibilities for directors, choosing the right legal structure is really important. I won't go into the nitty-gritty. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. But the actual legal structure is going to define your legal responsibilities, like the paperwork you need to fill out, the taxes you'll have to pay, how you can personally take the profit your business makes, and your personal responsibilities if your business makes a loss. However, the thing that a lot of startups forget to do is to think about the equity incentives that you should set up for co-founders before you start making a penny. And don't worry if you've just started up, like this is something that you can have as a discussion. Hopefully you're not too far down the line or anything like that. But creating a legally protected stake in the company is one way you can start your business without paying salaries. But you should think carefully about how you set this up, okay? So part of the reason why my first business failed was because we were afraid to negotiate with one another and set up the expectation within the team. So I'll explain. So when we started the company, it was a limited company. We issued 100 shares and shared between 4 directors. We thought the fairest way would be to split it equally, right? That seems like the logical way to do it. For us, it didn't really work out though, because I ended up doing roughly like 40 to 50% of the work, but I only had 25% of the company as well. After a while, things started to get tough because business is tough, there's ups and downs. I found myself really struggling to stay motivated because even at the time, I felt like it was unfair, you know? One thing that failing business taught me was the value of working with the right team and setting up the right structure so the company had the best chance to succeed. So in our current company, the shares aren't equal. It is directly related with how much money and time the directors have invested into the company. That's how we do it. Other people, do it differently, but that's how it works for us. At the time, the business that failed, my team was certainly competent, brilliant people. I'm still in contact with them today. We were able to develop a viable prototype, but there was no real glue holding us together. We didn't hang out together. We didn't talk outside of the project. Essentially, we were brought together by the promise of the product, and when that went wrong, there was nothing left. They drifted away, So I'm not saying that you need to be besties, with your directors, but it really helps. Like, I'm really grateful to be working with my best friends at Aragon Pixel. I met them in my second year of university. So the world of startups is littered with co-founders who end up hating each other just because they didn't work out that kind of thing right at the beginning. But as long as there's professional respect and belief in each other's ability and trust, you still have the potential to succeed. So when choosing your team members, obviously include people that you like, that's helpful, and admire, but you should really look at your weaknesses and blind spots and find others that can fill those gaps, and it means really looking at yourself. Plurality and diversity of thought, backgrounds, personality types, and skill sets are essential in building a strong team. For example, a group with too many extroverts, for example, is just as likely to fail as well as one with too many introverts, for example. There's lots of different benefits to having people from various different backgrounds. So now this is a very, very deeply personal and philosophical question you should ask yourself before starting a studio. So not everyone is suited to being a company owner. Being a successful employee doesn't always result in success as an entrepreneur. And just because you have the loudest voice in the room, it doesn't necessarily mean that people should look to you as a leader. Do you know what I mean? There have been various studies and theories that suggest that there is an ideal personality type for company ownership, but the consensus seems to be that there are some skills that can be taught and some qualities of ourselves that are really intrinsic. So a really important life lesson I've learned is that everyone has blind spots. It is really useful to have people around you that are not afraid to speak up and challenge you. And if people are not challenging you, you must really ask yourself why. Do you know what I mean? So how do you respond to feedback? And this is all about your communication style. So communication skills are really important, especially as the managing director of a company. Things like the ability to listen to people. Strangely, people really don't have that skill these days, but really listen, And reading nonverbal, projecting and reading nonverbal cues are the obvious ones that people know about, but communication skills also encompass things like managing stress and emotional awareness as well. Knowing that, I'm not feeling 100%, so I might not react in the best way, and being aware of that state of mind. That's really important, especially if you are the leader of a company. The ability to manage all of your feelings and reacting appropriately is the basis of effective communication. So if you're the kind of person that overreacts to negative feedback, or if you have a habit of taking out your stress out on your colleagues, then there are going to be issues down the line. These are pretty obvious examples, but some people are very unaware of how they come across and also unaware of how their actions affect people long after the interaction is over. So bad leaders create an environment of fear where colleagues are afraid to speak up against things that they disagree with. And as a leader, your job is to facilitate these discussions, not dictate. And if you've done your job right and set up the company equity incentives in the right way, you must be prepared to be outvoted. That is the sign of a true leader. And almost actively encourage that as well. Find ways to disagree with me. Please tell me ways in which this idea might not work and we can try to mitigate it. We have passionate discussions at Aragon Pixel all the time. We can be incredibly vulnerable with each other because we know that everybody, at the end of the day, there is so much love in the room. All we're trying to do is make decisions that are right for the project and for the team. So we trust one another implicitly. So when someone has a problem, it was clearly important enough for them to raise and almost definitely worth listening to, even if it is in the direction we end up going in. So I'm not sure where I picked this up. I'm really sorry. I would give credit to this, but we have a saying at the company, which is disagree and commit, right? So generally, this just in my experience, I'm sure you will have your own, but as long as everyone feels like their point of view has been heard, normally they're much happy buying into the idea and committing wholeheartedly. Yeah. As I said earlier, our core values is that everyone is responsible for the success of the project. So my real pet peeve is this attitude of, well, this idea sucks, but I'll wait to see it crash and burn so I can say I told you so, right? If there's an issue, anyone should be able to raise it. And if there's a glaring thing and you don't mention it and you're just going to sit back just so that you can be like, well, you know, I said it wouldn't work. You know, that is not the kind of culture you want to have in a company if you're trying to succeed. And you as the leader obviously need to listen and facilitate that. Yeah. So another thing is responsibility. I don't feel many people like really sell this these days. So of course, there's legal responsibilities, of course, so depending on the company structure, like I was saying earlier. And remember as well that you can hire people to take on accounting responsibilities and stuff like that, but ultimately you are the one that's legally responsible. So you have to kind of be prepared to do a little bit of homework, and pleading ignorance in this area is not an acceptable excuse. This is your job, you know, to understand how the company makes money. You need to be prepared at least to study a little bit to understand what's going on in pretty much every part of your company. I think also outside of the legal responsibilities and the more all-inclusive view, I think, is you need to basically think about your staff as people in your charge. You are responsible for your team. You're responsible a lot of the time for their rent, their happiness at work, and also facilitating their growth professionally. You know, you want them to improve. You don't want them to just stay the same the entire time. That's not great. And as an employer, you have what is called a fiduciary responsibility to your team. So a definition of that, it is a legal term. A fiduciary duty exists when a person or entity places trust, confidence, and reliance on another to exercise discretion or expertise in acting on behalf of that person. The fiduciary must knowingly accept that trust and confidence. So examples of this might be our parents, for example. They have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of their children, right? The kids are reliant on them. Medical professionals, we generally trust the doctor is giving us reliable information, right? Lawyers and whatnot. But as an employer, you have that same duty to your employees, which means, I believe, that you need to care. You need to care deeply about the people that come into your orbit. And beyond the bare minimum, because if you don't, people will just leave and go elsewhere. And I'm sure you all know that recruiting reliable team members is really difficult. So you really don't want to give them any more reasons to want to do that, especially if it's like a profit share situation as well. So probably one of the last sort of statements that I would like to make is, are you in this for the long haul? So I started my first business thinking rather foolishly that I'd be rich within a few years. Clearly that has not been the case. The thing that I've learned, the biggest reality check and piece of advice that I can give you today is that you must be prepared to think of this as really a long-term commitment, okay? Your co-founders need to be prepared for that too, as well. Anybody that's on this journey with you need to be absolutely aware of that. There is no shame in part-timing and moonlighting as a freelancer or working in a bar or retail while you're getting set up. There's no shame in making money to live. So in whatever way you can pay your rent and look after your immediate needs first, do it, you know. Then actually put the work in and rack up those hours. It also allows you to not make moves, to make moves more strategically rather than out of desperation, right? If you are okay and you can pay your mortgage and you can pay your rent and stuff like that, you can actually turn down opportunities. It makes your position more powerful, especially to turn down things that don't align with your core values. There is a difference between being busy and actually being productive as well. So that's pretty much it in terms of key concepts. So these are the 4 points I wanted to make. So make sure you know why you want to start a video game studio. Yeah, there are easier ways to make money. Why specifically that? Second, long-term views rather than short-term. You can get extremely lucky, of course, but there are many, many more that just won't, and you just have to graft towards it. Choosing your team members and your core directorship wisely is really, really important. And then, of course, take responsibility for your company. It's not that person's fault or the software fault or the market's fault. No, it's you that hasn't done the research, you know? And unfortunately, there is an element of luck. It's timing, it's execution, it's the team, it's like the idea itself. So many factors sort of relate to company startup. That I think that what you can do, the best thing that you can do is just mitigate risks so that you're not making panic decisions. No knee-jerk reactions. Everything needs to be strategic so that you have the best chance for company success. And that's it. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Right. Whew. It's very warm. Yes. There is a microphone going around. Thank you very much. I hope you were able to understand anyway. That's very much garbled.
I think please. Very pragmatic and actionable, which is what I like out of business talks. When you're setting a company culture, too often we wait until it happens to us, and then you try to engineer it afterward. And everybody knows social engineering is actually really, really hard. And it can be too late. Poison can enter the well, and it can be a really, really tough fight. When you were founding and getting Arrogant Pixel off the ground, how did you check yourself on making sure you're setting the right culture, that it's not just swimming in your head and everything's going to be fine, but what were the hard checks and balances you used on yourself to make sure the culture is off to the right start?
My co-founders keep me accountable all the time. If I mess up, they're the first ones to tell me. So I feel like just having this culture of just being like very respectful communication, but like not being afraid to be able to be like, I feel like that's going to be an issue down the line. And then having that discussion in front of like juniors and stuff as well. So they see us sort of how we tackle problems. So for example, if there is an issue and there are two people that are at opposing points, the thing is like, how important is this to you out of 10, for example? One might say 9, the other one might be like, actually, if I think about it, it really doesn't matter, to me, it's kind of like a 3. So the person who is feeling a lot more passionately about it normally gets their own way. I'm not saying that that's all the time, because obviously they might be wrong, but generally if people find a point more important, they have thought more about it and they've got a better argument, and generally it tends to win. But yeah, it's not, company culture is not something that I like created. It's something that definitely did happen. And it was just based on, well, the brute force, the personality that the directorship really did foster. And it was just the way that our friendship with those guys is all about communications. We talk all the time, all hours a day, even when we're not at work, Saturday and Sunday, we're having barbecues in each other's houses and stuff like that. I mean, it's just about making people relaxed, but we work really hard at the same time. I mean, I do guess we've got holidays, but it's generally kind of unlimited if you think about it. It's just people can take as much time off as they like, but people feel obligated to finish their work before they go home. And that's where I'm comfortable. Other people might disagree, but yeah, that's where I stand on that. I hope that answered your question. Yes, there was.
Hello, thank you for the talk. We're making a game at the moment, and the first game, although I feel it's got potential and I believe in it, it's not necessarily my dream game, although it's my business partner's kind of dream vision. And have you ever been in positions where you felt you were making something that is not necessarily your dream, but in a position where you feel like your business partner you have compromised your own vision because your business partner feel differently, or there's some kind of disagreement? How do you handle that kind of disagreement?
Disagreements happen in the company like literally every second, so it's really difficult. But that's what I mean. It's about disagreeing and committing. That's the thing. Even if like I hate this feature, if the rest of the directors think it's a good idea, it's a goer. You know, at the end of I've voiced my opinion. I think that this might, you know, blah, 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 but there might be technological arguments. There might be artistic arguments. There could be commercial, you know, issues surrounding that. And we need to hear all of it before making the decision of going in the right direction. But what you're talking about is like, am I working on my dream game right now? Kind of. But also, like, we have a bunch of outsourcing projects that we are not passionate about. We're getting paid, we make the thing, it's fine, it belongs to somebody else. Our own IP, as long as they are, again, like subversive in some way and commercially viable, I'm happy. You know, I don't have this one game I've always wanted to create. Maybe some of the team members do, but this isn't a passion project. You know, at the end of the day, we're a business. And we want to survive, you know, over many years. It's not like we want to make a game that we've always wanted to play. It's not necessarily like that. Our approach to, like, for example, the project that we're working on right now is a project that we created in order to work with partners, because that is the next logical step to the company. And we had to work within that brief because that was the goal. And I don't think any of us had like a specific idea for it. We just had like, you know, an idea pool and we just like messed around with it, thought of every single reason not to make it. And then whatever survived, that was the idea that we went with. And everybody was happy with that because we did that process, you know?
Thank you. I've come to realize sometimes not getting your way can be a blessing. Thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Right, anyone else?
How's it going? Thanks for the talk. Actually, a funny one, actually. So let's say if there's two founders of the company and then the responsibilities kind of change throughout, which I can see being quite a big problem. And let's say if both want to be the boss, which, you know, how do you kind of battle that? Like,
oh, it's tricky when there's two of you, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's the main thing, because it's like you can get to like loggerheads really, especially when it's 50-50 shares as well. So you can both be on opposing ends and never quite get the decision. I feel like there always does need to be a bit of a tiebreaker of some kind. And even if it's like 51% of 49, there needs to be that one person that is like, okay, I will take on the bulk of the responsibility. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, and it's normally, I'm not saying all the time, but it's normally the person that's an engineer, the one that sort of develops the software and can dictate that in game development studios, by the way, exclusively, and obviously in other businesses it's going to be different, but generally it's the software engineers that are the ones that tell you what is viable and what isn't. And that's where the buck stops a lot of the time. So yeah, anybody that's actually like producing the product and can actually like determine whether it's impossible or not is probably the one that should have the final say. Yeah. And it's only like a percentage or two, right? So it's not about ego, man. That's the thing. You've got to check that at the door, you know, when you're negotiating these equity shares and things like that. It is what is fair, right? Yeah. Cool. There's another one over there. Thank you.
So as a great talk, I really enjoyed that, and like someone else already said, very practical, down to earth advice. As someone who's like runs her own studio and also deals with a lot of students as well, like Jen, I know she knows I'll probably ask an educational question. Zal, that you mentioned a lot of things there. One of the groups you referred to at the beginning talk was like, you know, grads coming out of university, setting up a company, etc. What kind of top few things do you think are the big blind spots for those grads? Like they go in and like you might tell them stuff, but where do you think their biggest blind spots are when they think, I really enjoyed my final project, we're going to go and set up a company? What are kind of the top things that go wrong out of the myriad of things that could go wrong?
Oh, there's so many, right? We know students, and well, it is literally the lack of real world experience. Like I said, there are investors that won't invest in you unless you've had a few company failures under your belt, because the idea is that like you hopefully won't mess up with the £1 million budget, you know what I mean? Because you've already gone through that. And it's the sacrifice and the hard work, it's the responsibility. Like I said, a lot of students feel like, no offense, guys, but like a lot of graduates feel like they are entitled to that job, they're entitled to that role, and that is just not. We know that that is, in reality, that just doesn't work that way. And especially when you have, by the time you're like 25 or something, you will have had a couple of shitty jobs, a couple of like shitty bosses as well, and be less vulnerable to those sort of be less green when it comes to like actually earning money and like sort of functioning in the real world. So yeah, I would just say for any student, any grad student wanting to start up a company, just work, anything, doesn't matter, earn money, see what that's like, you know? And then hopefully you hate employment so much that it actually inspires you to go and start up a business, or vice versa, right? The worst thing that you can do is starting up a company because everybody thinks it's the brilliant idea, but it's actually not something that you're passionate about, and you end up getting dragged along, and then suddenly you're like, you know, responsible for like, you know, money and people and stuff like that, and it's rough. It's rough sometimes. But yeah, among a myriad of other things that we could complain about students, I think they just need that actual experience, and that comes with time. It comes with time. They need to be patient. Yes, anything else? Yes, so time's up, I'm afraid. Yeah, thank you so much. Right.